Hi, everybody. Uh, just wanted to share with you another reason why I am into collecting silver and gold. And that would be one thing that's been on my mind just because of everything that's going on lately with the economy and the world, is the possibility of an economic collapse. And I've been reading a lot about the history of things that would cause an economic collapse. And I think it's very possible that we could be close to it, or, it could happen in the next 10, 20 years. We don't really know, but it's something to be concerned about. And that's why I'm interested in collecting precious metals, is there's some safety in that and some opportunity in that. Right now, the situation doesn't look very good. The Fed just raised interest rates, which is good in a sense because that's supposed to help with inflation, but um, that historically doesn't guarantee that it will fix inflation. Hopefully it does, but if not, you know, then we have got bigger problems. We used to, a long time ago, we had a thing called stagflation back in the 70s, um, where the economy was in a recession, but we still had inflation. And that was not a normal thing because usually inflation is associated with a booming economy. Um, so we could be in that very situation as well. And if any of you were living in the time of the 70s, you probably remember that and how hard it was. And gas prices were really high, food prices were really high, rent was high, um, and yet jobs were not out there. Opportunities were slim, So that that's what I worry about. And with the current forecasts out there, a lot of it is predicting that we are going to be heading into recession, pretty much globally. So that's something to be concerned about, and also understanding the fact that it's already they're doing stuff to curb inflation that may not really help. So we could be heading into a really bad situation anyway. But nevertheless, if it doesn't happen now or next year or the next year, it could happen the next 10 or 20 years. But it's good to be aware of it. And also we know that things in the past have happened. You can go way back to the Greeks, the Romans. It was a little different back then. They didn't have like digital currency. They didn't have stock market. They didn't have everything we have now, with money, other than they had coins. Um, but you wonder, like, well, how could they have had inflation back then with coins? Well, all they did was take silver or gold coins and add different metals in over time. So they'd start off with a pure silver coin and then eventually add more and more copper or bronze or whatever else to the coin. And then it became less worthless, but they still it still had a value, it had a face value, but the coin itself had less value because the metal in itself was not precious metal. It was very common metals, because they had to resort to that so that they could give people more currency. And the issue, of course, with that is the more currency that goes out there, the more diluted the money supply is, and then the higher the prices go, and and so forth. So that happened back in the Greek times. It happened in the Roman times. During the Roman Empire, there's an example of Diocletian, who was the emperor of Rome around 284 AD, and at that point, before he became a Roman Empire, they were already adding different metals to their coins. But when he came in, he really made he made it even worse. Um, and so, just to kind of sum that up of what his situation was, is that he added he simply minted so many coins with copper and bronze and other metals in the coins that the inflation resulted into. So back then, a denarii was the actual currency, right? That's what they traded back in the Roman times, and so uh, when he when he started, I think there was like 50,000 denarii to a pound of gold, and then by the end of his reign, um, roughly about 20 years or so, the pound of gold was worth 2.12 billion denarii because of all of the over printing of money, you would say, right? They didn't print it, but they made the coins. Today we print money even easier. Um, so that's one example, right? And they had to revert to the barter system at some point because it was so diluted and that it was so um, inflated, the money supply, that people just gave up on it and they went back to bartering. And they probably bartered with regular silver and gold if they could get their hands on it. So, Germans after World War One, a lot of people know this, that they were in a huge amount of debt after World War One because they were um, indicted with war crimes and they had to pay the Allied countries back a lot of money because of the damage they caused during World War One, and so they were kind of in a situation, and so they ended up like printing a lot of marks, which is their dollar, right? And back somewhere around the beginning of the 20s, the Germans, their mark would probably buy. Well, I've got this online offline on a website on Wikipedia, but it says on Wikipedia that 160 marks is about what a loaf of bread cost back in around 1920, and by the end of 1922, it was 200 billion marks to buy a loaf of bread. So they did a lot of printing just to, because they needed, they didn't have the money to pay back um, the Allies, and then they figured they could get out of their situation by printing money, and then they found out that that didn't work very well, and it was not a good thing, and everyone went broke, and so they later had to go to gold. In fact, what they did is the Minister of Agriculture came up with an idea where he would make so much rye worth so much gold, and it kind of started from there, and so they had to use gold to back up the other commodities. So eventually they were able to stabilize at some point, of course, but that's another example. And but there's a lot. I mean, you may have heard of Zimbabwe, what's happened there. They still have issues. Argentina. So um, it's very, I mean, it's very real. It can happen anywhere, um, anytime. It could happen to us. Um, but what can be done? Well, just like I believe, or what I think is, you can only be prepared. we don't run the economy. We're only part of the economy. The government, the people we vote for, they run it for us. Of course, we've seen over time how things just get worse and worse with bureaucracy and the way our politicians and the bureaucrats they hire to run the country handle our affairs, and it's not looking good. It just seems to get worse, doesn't seem to get better. So we have to take matter in our own hands. That's the only thing I can really think of that we can do. But the good news is there is things we can do. We can save food for food storage. We can save water for water storage. We can save silver and gold coins. That's specifically what I want to get out there as a message, because I think it's going to be something that will perhaps one day become a very, very good idea when there is nothing the money that we have now is worthless because they printed so much of it that what are we going to do? We have to go back to bartering. And what can we barter with? Well, you can barter with anything you have, but you do need to store items to barter with. And silver and gold would be something that could be a commodity that people would want to trade, for different items like food or supplies. And I believe that's a possible scenario, so it can't hurt. But even if the economy does well, you can still make and grow money with gold and silver, especially if you collect rare coins. A lot of people don't realize that. You can collect silver and gold bullion, which it's gonna mostly protect your money in case things get out of control. But you can also buy rare coins, and those rare coins tend to go up in value when things are going great, because there's folks out there that collect them, and the more unique and rare a coin is, the more value it gains over time. It's like baseball cards or stamps or art, right? It goes up in price as it becomes more rare. So, in fact, there's an example that I read that was very intriguing to me. It was in a book that I bought called The Essential Guide to Investing in Precious Metals. And in there, he cited an example of a man named Harold Barrowford, who back in the 30s or 40s, at one point, gold coins were illegal to purchase. And that lasted a long time, somewhere between the 30s and all the way up until the late 60s. It was illegal to get gold coins. So there was a loophole to that. They did allow collectors to purchase like rare coins, and so there were some people that took advantage of it. And this man by the name of Harold Barrowford, he was a lawyer in New York, but he just decided, hey, I'm going to try to find these rare gold coins, which he did. And he spent somewhere around the ballpark of $13,000 on these coins, which is a chunk of money, especially for back then, but he did it one at a time. And by the time, by around the year 1978, someone came around and wanted to purchase that whole collection. And it ended up being $1.2 million. So that was a very significant gain from just those coins. They gained in value because of the price of gold, but they gained in the value because of the rareness of the coins. So another story too is, when they started this Silver Eagle program in 1986, Um, if you would have bought a coin starting then, every month, and each coin, as long as each coin was the top grade, an MS70 coin, and you bought one every month, and they weren't that much back then. They were, I think, as low as $5-10. I mean, it's gone up over time, but for one coin, I mean, not much. Now they're somewhere around $35 a coin, right? So, but if you would have bought one per month MS70 grade coin from 1986 to now, you'd have over $1.2 million. So there is a lot to the rare the rare coins and the rare vintages out there. If you can get those, and good times are good, you're going to do well. Times are bad, you're going to have a lot of silver bullion or silver or gold bullion um, that it's going to be worth a lot if there's not really any money around. So um, anyway, that's all I have to tell you here today. I hope you subscribe and follow this channel, and I'll keep sharing my thoughts. Thanks.